So you may have seen many videos appearing on YouTube saying stop killing games. And you may be wondering, what is all of this all about? Well, games are slowly but surely becoming more online based. And that means that inevitably when games developers decide to pull the plug, well, we can't play them anymore. We are out of luck. And it's not just about the fact that games are now being taken off marketplaces or are no longer playable entirely. By nature, a lot of these practices are actually very exploitative. For example, games developers will have games up on the PlayStation Store or Xbox Store or Steam or Epic Games, and they'll be selling them at a reasonable amount of money for 10 years after the game comes out. Then out of nowhere, they just decide to discontinue the game. And no, I don't mean you can't buy it, I mean you've bought it and you can't actually play it. There's been many examples of this over the past few years where games have just been pulled and people who may have only bought the game just months before have spent, in some cases, $70 to $100 for a game that they can no longer play. So what has this Stop Killing Games initiative got to do with it? Well, at the moment there are consumer protection laws in both Europe, the UK and the United States. But the problem is games themselves aren't regulated in the same way. For example, if I bought a vehicle and a day later the manufacturer decided that they were going to push a magic button and the car stops working, there are many laws in place that protect me from that eventuality. But it's not quite the same with games. In fact, the game market is moving so fast that UK and European and US laws haven't quite caught up with where gaming's at. The gaming protections are in place consist of things like if you buy a disc for a game, the games developer can't come and yank that disc out of your hand. But games developers are now using grey areas to get around that. Games developers have started to self-describe their own games as almost like a rental. And this brings up the conversation, is stealing if you could never own it in the first place? But I do think there's arguments for and against, and I know that's not what people are going to want to hear. To be clear, I'm on the stance 99.999% that we should stop this practice happening. But there is that 0.1% of me that does understand in some occasions why that's not possible. Let me just give you some loose examples of scenarios that very commonly exist in gaming. For example, if you license music for a game, say if you've got like a driving game or a shooting game and you've spent maybe $5-6 million licensing music and you own that licensing for maybe 10 years. Well, after those 10 years are up, to continue having that music in your game, you might have to pay out the same amount of money again to keep that going. The same thing applies to vehicles, game engines, assets. There's so many different grey areas and caveats around many things involved in the gaming industry, which means that for some older games that maybe the company makes, I don't know, $500,000 or $1 million a year off those old games, it isn't cost effective for them to keep those games going on the shelf. It'd be a case of them going back through their whole catalogue of previous games and spending potentially hundreds of millions, if not billions of dollars to keep those games alive and well. So there is an argument for why some things can't work. Now, if it's just music, fine, remove the music from the game. If it's just things like online servers, then, I mean, well, it would suck, so remove online servers from the game, but still allow us to explore the world. But for future games, we definitely need to start future-proofing the market. It's crazy to think that some games that you're currently looking at a PlayStation Store, the ones that you've wishlisted, the ones that are even yet to be released, in 10 years' time, you may not be able to play them anymore. And this speaks of a whole attitude from games development and kind of the venture capitalist side of gaming, where we don't own our games anymore. And to be honest, I'm not too bothered about not owning my game anymore if I can play it whenever I want. If I can play it for the next 50 years, 100 years, if I can show my kids it one day, that sort of side of it doesn't really bother me. What bothers me is that the fact that we don't own our games is being used to exploit us as gamers and as fans of these games developers. Now, to be clear, this isn't Joe Blogg's fault who works for XYZ Gaming. That's not his fault. This is more of a corporate level industry established problem that's only going to get worse with time unless we actually do something about it. Now, there are petitions that you can sign and they'll all be linked down below and in the pinned comments. And one of the petitions, in particular the one for the UK, well, the government actually responded to the petition in February of this year, basically sticking up two fingers to all of us and saying that they don't really care and they have no interest in really doing anything about it. But over the past week, and for reasons that can be covered by another YouTube channel that's too complicated and convoluted, but this has really taken off. And some of the biggest YouTubers in the planet and some of the biggest creators, outlets, and pretty much everyone else has been very vocal about the these issues. And the signatures, I mean, this screenshot on screen is correct as of 9:30 p.m. on Thursday, the 3rd of July in the UK, 2025. The actual amount of signatures may be entirely different by the time you actually see this video. But we definitely 1,000,000% need to do something about this. Now, what would signing any of this accomplish for anyone? And it's a very good question that some people might have. Well, if you sign the UK petition or the petition in the EU or even the US petitions, it will put issues like this on a global scale. Because at the moment, games developers in the grand scheme of things are taking an inch. But what is the next step? What is that next mile? And to be honest, I think to a lot of gamers it probably feels like they're already taking that mile from us, but it will only get worse. The only way that we've got into this scenario is that games developers and companies can realize that they can move that goalpost forwards and forwards and forwards until we're dealing with a whole new different set of rules. At the moment, a lot of games developers and publishers are operating in a grey area that hasn't really been established under law. So a lot of the people that make and enforce the various laws that are involved at the moment, they're only aware as games as being a disc you buy at a local store. They're not thinking about games distribution in the way that it is now become the industry norm, which is live service models. And the protections that are being put in place aren't covering us in any way. Now, I know that this might sound pointless and it just looks like another petition on the internet, of which we've had many that have appeared over the decades of gaming. But it is important. Things like this come down to precedent. So precedent is basically what is set in place for us moving forwards. I've pretty much resigned to the fact that games developers aren't going to go back into business and retrospectively go back to their old games and relaunch them so we can play them all. And to be honest, I understand that. 10 years ago, games developers weren't thinking about where they're going to be 10 years in the future and the fact that they'll have to relicense all of their music assets, game engines, all of this sort of stuff. That's a fully understandable viewpoint. But what isn't understandable is that games developers are still producing games that are purely only online based, like even story driven games that are being online based when they don't need to be. And it gives the games developers the ability to just turn their servers off tomorrow and take away the games that we love. And I think this is where the UK government in particular aren't really understanding. These aren't your little TikTok brain rot audience games for iPad kids. Like, these aren't games like Flappy Bird where you just get a high score. Us as gamers have a very strong connection to the games we play because it's not like a movie where you watch it for an hour or an hour and a half or 2 hours. We spend hundreds if not thousands of hours in some of these games and we build up friendships, communities, whole YouTube channels in my case, around individual games. The UK, EU and United States government not doing anything about this to legislate this and to make sure these things stop happening is only going to make the practices more exploitative. Put it this way, if it costs maybe, I don't know, $10 million a year to keep a game online, with servers, hosting, and employing the people to manage it and all of that sort of stuff, and the game releases and it's not that good, at the moment, games developers can just flick a switch, turn it all off and stop spending the money. Meanwhile, we have all paid for the games. And at the moment, we're not protected from that. So if you do have a spare couple of minutes, go to the link down below, click it, sign up, and let's try and actually make a difference. We're not bringing world peace, we're not ending wars, but what we are doing is making sure that future gamers at least get what they paid for. And as a gaming YouTube channel, I think that's worth talking about. Thank you for watching, and I shall see you all in the next video.